a very warm welcome from my side as well. I'm really happy to be back here the third time to be with you on creative processes in mediation. And today is a part 2 where we want to look at a practical guide of how to design these kinds of processes and what is the effect and how to do this. And so my first question to you is, unless you don't want to be on the recording and you don't want to be seen, I would love for you to turn on your camera. I know, Ian, you just disappeared. Because I want to have an active conversation with you today. I've prepared in a way that we can really discuss certain things. I find that much more intriguing and enlivening to really exchange information rather than me doing a 1-hour teaching and you sitting back and not being able to share some of your insights. So please, with a lot of courage, turn on your camera so that we can have a good conversation and we can interact. That said, let me give you a brief introduction of who I am and why I'm here and what's happening. So my name is Katrin Keune. I'm based in Germany between Cologne and Frankfurt. And I've been a business coach working with the arts-based method for 15 years. I'm mostly concerned with leadership development and communication of all sorts. And so in that respect, I've been conducting many different mediations within work contexts, within teams, within supervisors and bosses and their employees. And so today we're going to focus on that mostly because that's my expertise. But if you have questions about creative processes in other contexts, let's discuss it and let's see what we can do about that. I'm working after the approach of the so-called intermodal decentering by Paulo Knill. So just that you've heard the approach, it's not just, art making in whatever way or creative processes in whatever way, but it is an in itself closed approach that has its own theoretical base and its own philosophy behind it, which then helps me to understand how creative processes need to be designed. Why are we doing this? What's the anticipated outcome? What needs to be concerned and recognized and approached when we're designing these things? So again, it's the intermodal decentering by Paulo Knill. He was a Swiss guy who did this in context with others. So in order for us to quickly understand who's here, I can see that there's high calibers of established people, as I imagine by your wonderful faces. Tell me, who of you has worked with creative processes in mediation already by sign of hand? And then maybe 1 or 2 of you can say in 2 sentences, 1 sentence, what would you do, like a visualization or maybe some movement-based thing or something theater, role play? And then what was the effect of using this kind of approach? So let's begin by first show of hand. Who of you has already approached mediation and tried to diverge from the standard into using something creatively? Who has done this of you before? Yay, Ian, good. Okay, so all of you are interested in this. Good. So Ian and Olga, maybe you can share with 2 sentences. What kind of creative process was it? And what was the effect of using it? Olga, why don't you begin?
Hi, everyone. I'm using folk tales to build connections with refugees and immigrants working with unaccompanied minors, mostly in shelter houses in Greece. So I was utilizing storytelling as a form of decentralizing from your story, from your trauma.
Yeah.
To share your story, rewrite your story, maybe.
Okay.
And to build the bridges between the local communities and the refugees. Yeah.
Well, excellent. This is wonderful. Sounds like a very rich way of really bringing connection and new content, also with cultural heritage and all of these things into the game. Nice. Thank you. What about you, Ian?
I used visual representation in vision building for the Myanmar peace process. So we had a particular impasse with various armed groups, and it was trying to bring them together to show them to draw what they thought the future was, to draw on paper what the future was, and then try and bring it together.
Wonderful. And what was the effect?
They understood the issues a lot better, and we were able then to take that into. I then got them to then, from the pictures, to write vision statements, which we then used for developing their own policies towards the peace process.
Right. How cool is that? Wonderful, wonderful. It really shows that, you know, there's a saying, an image says more than 1,000 words, because an image carries emotional content and cultural context and, you know, all of these things together that we don't need to particularly put in words, but it's there already tangible. So very cool. Excellent. So you have some expertise. I am a very firm believer that if we go beyond language, beyond the rational process, the linear process of using words to enlighten a certain conflict, if we use non-linear, circular, spontaneous processes, as in creativity, we can create a more holistic way of thinking about a certain situation and really addressing things that are there in the room, but that are very hard to grasp, like emotions, like certain tensions, like certain impasses where we're like, I wonder, something is going on here. I can't really pinpoint it, right? So creative processes in that moment will enlighten this and will help us to bring it into the room, to make it more tangible and to understand it in a new way, to kind of enlarge our thinking process. So today, I want to discuss this with you, how this is helpful, what we do with it, how we design it. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. As you can see, we're in the Using Creative Processes in Mediations Part 2. And here is what I would like to do with you. First, I want to think about what is a creative process, because hand to heart, if we all talk about creative processes, I think every single one of us in the room has a different understanding of what we mean by that. Some people think, oh, it's a visualization. Some think, oh, it's, a full art making process. Others think it's maybe, using just not language, but something else, interesting questions or something. So I want to shed light on what I understand under creative process. And then in the second step, what is the effect of using these kinds of processes? And because I'm using art making processes with a very low skill, not technical details, but starting to scribble and to draw out something, or using the body to create certain movements, or using theater and imagination in that sense, we want to discuss what are the effects of using these kinds of creative processes in general, what are the effects on the individual, and then in the context of mediation, what is the usage of these processes, what are certain intentions or goals of using this, and then what could be possible outcomes. So this is just background information that I want to have a discussion with you about. And then we're going to look at certain designs, and we're going to carry out one process together. I'm going to guide you through. You're going to be my guinea pig. And we're just going to see what is the effect, how is the design, what is the effect on me, how could we possibly use it. Okay? How does that sound? Good? Yeah? Excellent. All right. To the first question. In your understanding, what is a creative process? Like, if you needed to define it or explain it to someone else, when you're being creative, when you're doing something creative, when you're using creativity, what do you do exactly? How would you describe that? Let's collect some of the definitions, some of these ideas that you have about that. Who would like to go first? Something. There's no right or wrong. It's just, entering some thoughts here. Let's brainstorm together. Yes. Angela or Angela?
Angela. Yeah.
Angela. Very good.
Hi. So I think first of all, it's really about using imagination for me. So to make this step back and to think, out of the
Yes.
box and use your imagination. So.
Yes, and thank you for this. How important is that, right? I have one of my teachers used to say, if we can't imagine change, we can't even get there. There's no way. It starts with the imagination of thinking outside the box, of doing something different from our rational, logical, linear way. Cool. Angela, thank you. Yes, I completely agree. Nauman, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's moving from the traditional norms and breaking the barrier to actually connect, as Angela said, through the imagination. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Breaking barriers and to connect. I think this is a very, very important aspect when we start to create something in the room together. It facilitates connection. It facilitates moving beyond certain barriers or things that are established already into a new play space. And so this, of course, creates then different outcomes. Cool. Yes, I totally agree. Susanna, what are your thoughts?
I am thinking in the state, if I think in the state that I am when I've been creative, I think that there is a need of basic level of security and confidence to be able to feel free to dream that there is something possible.
Thank you.
That's
Very
it.
important. We need to have that framing and that kind of intention so that we know whenever I explore something now, I'm safe. No one will judge me for it, or I will not feel awkward because someone will make me stand out or something. Yes, absolutely correct. So it needs a certain framing. We're going to talk about that. Good. So two more, and then let's move on. Ian, what are your definitions?
I think, well, people have covered everything pretty much, but I think for me, you're using your imagination, but what you're trying to do is to change people's perspectives, to get them to look at things from a different viewpoint. So taking them outside their comfort zone and saying, right, let's just challenge the norms.
Absolutely. And I think all of these aspects are so vivid. Taking someone out of their comfort zone means they need to move a step towards doing something differently, doing something a little bit new. And I mean, this is what we're asking. That's the goal of mediation, to not be, in the same, I've always been doing this and I want this and here's what we do, but to step out of that and create a new play range. Cool. And that requires stepping out of your comfort zone, of course. Yeah, cool. Okay, Olga, last one.
Maybe a way also to express your feelings, to kind of show, to try to be understood to the other person.
I very much agree, because look, when I am angry and I say I'm really angry, it is very different than when I take a drum and I do this. Right? I'm sorry for this. I took the microphone with me, but you get the point, right? It's a different kind of connotation when we get to experience it through a different form rather than with words. Cool, good. So let me share what I found in my collection. It's not inclusive, but it's some of the things that I want to highlight. So to me, a creative process always entails a certain spontaneous action without a certain goal. It's not that I'm engaging in something I want an anticipated outcome, but I want a spontaneous action, seeing what happens. The term poiesis is one of the principles of designing a creative process that we're going to get back to a little bit later. I think this kind of creative process should always be repetitious in some form. When we're starting to draw, we're starting to make certain lines and marks, that might be repetitious. When we work with sound or something, we're letting repetition happen in order to understand better. That's basically what happens. It is a process that should happen without pre-reflection or anticipation of a result. It is a process also that in and of itself doesn't entail hierarchies. So when we're really in a creative process, it's not that the boss stays the boss and always says what to do and the employee only has a certain play range. But in the creative process, these roles are being forgotten and taken apart, and everyone is equally valid and important in the designing and in the making of the process. That's very important. I also think two more things that are crucial that we're going to go over a little bit later is a phenomenological attitude that we as mediators teach our mediees, or how you call these, the different parties, to observe rather than to interpret. So we're not making art in order to understand their psychology better, at least that's not my approach, but to help enlighten the thinking process together, weaving in all of our imagination and our associations, and not to understand the diagnosis better. Yeah, because that's an interpretation, and in the interpretation, we're starting to work with concepts, and concepts are limiting. They are always a simplified fashion of something much more complex, which in a mediation, we need to keep that complexity in order to really find a good option making in the very end. If we get into concepts too early, there is no leeway, there is no wiggle room to really come up with good solutions in the end. So a phenomenological attitude helps to keep that up. And the last thing that a lot of you have already spoken about is the notion of embodiment. When we start to drum, when we start to draw, our whole body is involved. The impulses, the spontaneity, the imagination, all kinds of different wisdom and knowledge that really comes from the body becomes tangible and used in the room, far beyond language. And that's what makes it so valid and so vivid that a creative process can really open up. And here it says, embodiment means every thought I have, every sensation I have is based in the body. So if I'm looking outside and I'm seeing a green leaf, before I can have the thought green, there is physically happening of photons coming onto my lens in my eye. There, the impulse is being directed towards my nervous system. It's guided towards my brain, and in the brain, certain other connections help me with the interpretation, all green. But before the interpretation happens, a physical process is occurring. Same thing with sensations on the skin. If I'm moving my hand to a hot plate, I have it torn away faster than I can have the thought, oh, this is hot. Do you know what I mean? So the body has a very intricate wisdom and knowledge about things that my brain can only access and proceed in a second step. And so when we use these creative processes, this kind of knowledge is being tapped into, which makes it so exciting. At least that's what I think. Good. So let's look at the outcome. What are effects of a creative process? What does art making, in my situation, do? And pardon my slides, they're very dry. They're just listing, the things. That's why I wanted to have a conversation with you. The most important things are, I think, written on here. First of all, it goes beyond language. It makes unspoken circumstances or tensions that are in the room, it makes them tangible and visible without accusing, without pointing out, oh, we're always so tensed. And this is that situation when that and that comes up. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. When we feel like there are certain things going on, we don't know what it is, and then we're entering a little creative process, all of a sudden it becomes apparent. Oh, maybe this is what this is about. It strengthens, this is what Naumann, what you said, it strengthens the ability to relate, to connect, and thus it builds empathy. The ability to start to listen to each other again, to relate, which is so crucial in coming to a good outcome. It fosters curiosity and interest also for others. It lies in the nature of playing around. It can enliven and motivate and enrich my personal experience and also the experience of what we're doing here together. And what we said before, by using the imagination, it creates something new, always. And if the newness is only, oh, I feel a little bit more relaxed now, I can breathe again. You know, maybe that's the newness that wasn't there before, but now we have entered that state. And in the best sense, this is what Ian, what you said, it changes perspectives and even enhances ideas or brings up new ideas that weren't present before. Good. So now, as we have looked at this, what could be goals in mediation when we're using processes like that? So in your own understanding, what would you use a creative process for? Let's think about mediative processes. Maybe you've started, or maybe you're somewhere in between. What could be an intention for using a creative process? Tell me. Any ideas? So I think, Ian, you already mentioned something before when you said, you know, you were at this impasse in this peace building environment where it was very hard to come up with a vision or to look, you know, for future prospects. We don't know, we're in our, you know, own little area, and then you started to do a creative process and that opened up. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, linked to that, I think for me in mediation, it would be developing things like really understanding people's positions, interests, and needs between the different groups. So using that process amongst themselves first is one thing I would use, and then when you've actually got people on some kind of level ground, it's then identifying, and I have used it in different contexts before, is also what is the common ground? You know, what is it? What are the key issues that we face? We can use creative processes.
Very good. Excellent. So all of these different situations really help to open up the play range, right? And to understand a little bit more than what we understood before. So you're talking about when the mediation is well in process and we get to certain different kinds of impasses, right? Good. How about you, Nauman? What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, I've not practically gotten involved in mediation or these processes, but I have experienced my mentors doing it. But coming from an area where I belong, that's called North Waziristan. It's a Pashtun-dominated area which is close to Afghanistan. So we have this code of conduct of Pakhtunwali, and there are different traditions of a traditional dance which is called Atan. And Ian might have known because of his Afghanistan tour as well. Atan is a very traditional dance of Pashtun culture. So what I feel is that sometimes when you are stuck in a situation where there is a deadlock and you cannot bring the parties together, sometimes these sort of traditional cultural things connect the people together, even dances. So that ensures the dialogue process to make sure. So that is how I feel that in our culture, when there is a problem between the dialogue and there's a deadlock, so this is how we connect the people either through those tribal structures, those tribal traditions, and these activities.
Very good. So what I'm hearing, putting it into my own words, creative processes don't need to be necessarily topic related, but they can just serve the atmosphere or the connection between the parties. But when that got lost, you know, and people are more in the fighting mode, or they're more in the, you know, in the antagony of things, then to do a break, to do something creative that is not related to getting further in the mediation, but to establishing a certain atmosphere and connection again, so that mediation becomes possible. Yes, I very much agree. Cool. Okay, and Angela, last comment?
I also absolutely agree. So I'm totally new to mediation, but what I usually do is I'm working in the field of communications is when I do workshops is I really like opening up with this similar to what Norman said, basically to widen this perspective and not to start thinking already in these, like in the niche or in one corridor. Really
Yeah.
to open up and talk about in a broad perspective about that topic, and then it helps you in the end to see, okay, where do we want to need to focus on? So it's
Right.
something to really to start that process, that thinking, and not, let's say, just stay within one.
Very nice.
Basically.
And so in that context, it could even be useful to start at the beginning, to begin the thought process, to bring a little lightness into it, a little different way of playing around with ideas and not being so dead serious, like, okay, mediation, let's go. Yeah, very good. I very much agree. Cool. Guys, it's wonderful to talk to you. Really, I love this. I love that we can have this little chat. So here is what I collected, again, in this term of intentions. I first think that one of the good helpers why creative processes are working is that it creates relaxation and with that emotional regulation. So whenever emotions are running high or there's an impasse, doing something like that would be helpful. It also accesses body knowledge, as I said before, and fosters new perspectives and a bigger play range. It also enables sometimes to create new emotions beyond the one angry, frustrated, isolating, emotion out of a stuck situation. And it is pulling an unspecified tension or energy that's happening into something tangible to work with. So these are kinds of intentions for a creative process in mediation and why we would use it. Now let's look at what could be possible outcomes. And again, they're overlapping a little bit, but I'm defining it like this. You will see later on because that's important in the design. So again, as we said, it could foster relaxation, release of tension and stress, emotional regulation. It could bring in, and this is what you said, Angela and Naumann also before, the possibility to be with each other in one room. I had several mediations where I had pre-caucuses with everyone, or not caucuses, but individual sessions to first enlighten the conflict from each individual side before I would bring the parties together. And they would say, I actually am having a hard time being with this person in the same room. Okay, well then how can you mediate? So I kind of coaxed them into trying it out for a certain amount of time, promising them that I would make sure that safety is ensured and that, if it doesn't work out, we finish it and we create a separation and all of that. And then I would begin with a creative process because then it would take out the tension and now I need to perform, now I need to talk about all of these things. Oh, good. And it opens up the possibility to listen to each other again and to even maybe create curiosity a little bit more than before. Good. So with that said, let me give you just a couple of things that are important in the design of the art-making process, of the creative process, before we then exercise one thing through. If you want to work with creative processes, you first have to become clear, what is my intention? What do I want to achieve? And Naumann, as you said, maybe connection got lost and people are really in fighting mode and they don't want to relate to each other. Creative process could help. Maybe it's topic related, that we get stuck on a certain topic and we can't envision the future. Then a creative process could help. Maybe it's in the very beginning to relax the situation, kind of ease our way into. So all of these are different intentions and possibilities of what I want to do with a creative process. You have to know what you want to do because that, of course, helps you in the design of finding the right discipline and the right process for what you want to achieve. For example, if you want to create a vision, maybe dancing together could be helpful, but it's maybe not the best process to really come up with a good vision, even though I think there is something to harvest from it. But that might be a little bit more tricky, right? So you see what I mean. That then lends, as I said, to designing, what process lends itself to this intention. So if we want to connect, we need to do something where people are getting into connection and not having them all draw their own image in the room all by themselves and then bringing it together and say, oh, this is a great picture and this is a great picture. This is not really creating connection. So you need to design a process where people get the chance to connect with each other. And this could be, if we stay in the visual arts, that they create an image or a visual together, that they build a sculpture together, not each individual a sculpture, but one big frame together, one big structure. Or if we look at other disciplines, if we want connection to happen, to dance with each other, or to share folk stories, not one folk story for everyone, but everyone sharing a little folk story and then finding commonalities in them, or finding, what are the common cultural assumptions that are underlying these folk tales, etc. So knowing my intention leads to knowing what I want to do in an art making process. And then I think in this creative process, we need to follow these 3 principles that I spoke about. First of all, really staying phenomenological, just observing what's happening and being able to describe that rather than doing the interpretation. You will then ask your different parties, what does that mean to you? So now you know that we've danced together and you feel a feeling of relaxation and you realize I can hold hands with, with these different people in the room. What does that mean to you? What are you taking away from that? And it's not you as the mediator to make that interpretation, but of course them to come up with, how are they putting this into their own context? So staying phenomenological, really observing well and describing. The second thing is poiesis, so that these processes should create a frame in which I can really be free and spontaneous, and in which it's not something to achieve. Because as soon as I say, now draw your vision and draw it in a very realistic way. So if it should be a castle, make sure that I can recognize the castle. That would be a very closed up process, right? With a very particular goal, not helpful because we're not in an art making class and not in a Picasso class, So poiesis is the act of creation intentionless, with a lot of play, with a lot of spontaneity, using the imagination. And the last thing is that you need to be aware of that the body is involved, so that we're not just sitting back and relaxing. If you really think at storytelling, for example, folk telling, people are often in the traditions, they're often enacting the different characters, right? They're becoming the raven who's eating the cheese from the fox, or they're becoming these people as they're telling the story. And so then the whole physical knowledge comes into play. And that's why why art in general, any kind of art, is so preferable, because it always entails the body. If I'm drawing, my body is moving. If I'm singing, it comes out of my voice. If I'm dancing, my body is involved. If I'm playing theater, there's no other way. Good. So these 3 principles should be observed, and then it should be pretty easy for you to come up with a good idea of what can I do if you, follow these 3 principles. And then the last step is, how do I communicate what I want to do now? And this is what Susanna, I think, said before, in terms of creating safety. You need to justify why you're bringing this in. You need to explain it and put it into context in a rational way, so that people are willing to take the big step with you. Otherwise, they're going to say, No, I'm not going to do this because that's ridiculous, and my kids in kindergarten do that, and I'm not going to be stood out here. I don't want to do that. So why are you doing it? What for? What is it that you're planning on a general basis? Don't explain to them in very big detail, because otherwise they're going to start to reflect and it's not going to be a spontaneous process anymore. And then get the permission. Get permission in terms of, is that okay for you? Can we do this now for the next 20 minutes? Okay. So that said, let us start. I want to create a little process with you together so that you can get to experience it. And then we're going to talk about maybe some examples from you where you say, I have a certain mediation case here, and then we could brainstorm together what creative process could be feasible and usable in this kind of particular context. Are you interested? Yes? Good. So you are my guinea pigs now. Let's imagine I'm the mediator and you are my different parties. It doesn't matter so much where the conflict lies. Let's just say it's the beginning of the mediation. You're two different parties in the room that are being very stressed out about sitting there. They actually rather not want to sit there because, tensions have been running high, relations have not been really good. And so there's a lot of erg here. So both of the parties have given their opening remarks, saying we're here why, and this is the purpose, and this is where we want to go, and these are our resources. And then you say, listen. And you realize that the tension is so high that beginning now would be very difficult because people are very stuck up. They're really short languaged with their words. There's a lot of tension. And you realize carrying on like this could maybe lead to some impasse or to some too big of a tension to really be helpful in the very beginning. And your intention is to release that and to find a way that these two parties can be in the same room in a little more relaxed fashion. Okay? That's the intention. So here is what I would say. Now that you've stated your opening remarks, thank you for that, and we've had a first outline, why you're here and what you envision, I propose that we now, instead of going on verbally, bring in what else is there, which images and metaphors and readings are there that you're concerned with that are hard to talk about, in order to bring in a little bit of relaxation and ease, and to find a way that we can maybe establish a little bit better a common ground. And don't worry, it's going to be all easy. You don't have to perform or do anything special. I just want to ask you to use your imagination a little bit, and I'm going to guide you through this process. It's only going to take 10 minutes, and you will need a piece of paper and a pen to write with, or a pen to make marks with. Do you have that ready? If not, then please make it ready now. And if you have colored pencils or pens, that would even be better. You don't have to, but if you had them handy, good. Okay. So then everyone prepared? Hopefully you did. And then I would say, so is that okay for you for the next 10 minutes to kind of release the tension a little bit and get us going in a little different direction so that we can access a little different way of thinking? Would you be willing to try that with me? Can I see your reaction? Yeah. Good. Okay. Excellent. So let's do that then. And I'll guide you through don't worry. Now, this is a side note that I would, of course, not make if we were in the same room together. But if we were working online, I would say, and you're allowed now for the next 10 minutes, if you felt more safe, to turn off your camera, to really be in your own space, and to feel safe with whatever you're doing. You don't have to, but you're very welcome to do so. Okay, good. So now we begin. And we will begin with a very simple body scan. You might have done something like that before in some yoga class or some fitness class, and I'm going to guide you through. It's going to be very simple. So please lean back in your chair, relax, put both of your feet on the ground so that you can be in touch with the floor and not have them dangling somewhere. And relax. You're very allowed to slouch on your chair and to really get comfortable. It doesn't need to look pretty anymore. And then if you can, lower your eyes away from the camera. Turn them down so that you can really access your own space and you become aware of your own self and you're not distracted by anything else. And so as you're sitting there, you're even welcomed, if you wanted to close your eyes. The first thing is that we take a deep breath. In your nose, out through your mouth. And again, in your nose and out through your mouth. Good. And then begin to pay attention to your head and to your neck muscles. And with your lowered gaze or your eyes closed, begin to slightly and gently move your head around in ways that will help you relax. So you may want to circle your head a little bit. You may want to twist it from one side to another. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with the movement. There's nothing right or wrong. Just whatever feels good to your neck spine as you're doing this. And then slowly move into your shoulders. And start to rotate your shoulders. Move them up and down and around. And just sense, oh gosh, where's all the tension? Where's all the little knots? The things that are uncomfortable in your shoulder. And get your shoulders to move slightly, to begin to connect in your awareness with your shoulders. And if you wanted to, you can even take your elbows out to the side and start to rotate them to get a little bit more sensation out of that. Very good. And breathe. Don't stop breathing. Very important to breathe. And then for a moment, you take both of your hands and you put them on your belly. And you just let them rest there and feel how your belly can relax. And let the belly be round and soft and big. The belly doesn't need to be flat or portraying a certain image now. It can just let go and expand, be wide. Good. And take a deep, yummy breath into the belly. And then you go down to your thighs and you begin to gently tap your thighs as you're sitting. Put your hand surface on your thighs and start to tap them lightly to kind of wake up the surface of your thighs, the skin, as if all the cells in there could kind of stretch towards your tapping hands, expand, wake up, create a little firework in these thighs. And then if you can reach your calves and your feet, go down there for a moment. If not, just bring your attention down there. Move into your shins, into your ankles, into your feet, and feel the feet on the floor for a moment. And when you've done that, I want you to move your attention to your inner emotional landscape and feel like what is going on inside of you. We're sitting here, two different parties wanting two different things, feeling maybe a little bit tensed, a little bit confused, maybe a little bit scared. Maybe it's hard to breathe in a moment like that. Just notice these things and notice how your body is dealing with it, where it sits in your body. Maybe it sits in your belly or in your chest. And then let the conflict, whatever is going on there between you, be there in your consciousness, in your awareness. How does it feel like? How is that difficulty, these different difficulties? Can you really sense them in your body? Can you locate them? Maybe it brings pressure on your chest, or maybe it brings sickness to your stomach, or maybe your belly gets very tensed and tight and you feel fire and anger burning there. Or maybe your shoulders start to get tensed and your neck starts to pull in from fear. So just notice that. Notice what is going on. And then in the next step, I will ask you to use your imagination and to work very spontaneously. So first listen to what I say and then do it. So in a little moment, you will slowly blink your eyes open. And without looking at the camera or without looking around the room, you're going to turn to your page that you have gotten ready. You will pick up your pen and you will start to make a mark, draw out lines. If the conflict and what you're feeling inside could be turned into a big line and a scribble, how would that look like? And so now slowly blink your eyes open, go to your page and start to scribble out in a big long line and a big scribble. How could that look like what you just now felt inside about the situation, the conflict, whatever you felt in your inner landscape? How could that look like? And start to draw it out in a wild scribble. Just 1 minute, very briefly. And breathe. Very good. So come to a close with that scribble. It's just a very short little moment. See if you can add the last marks. And then when you're done, put down your pen and look back into the camera so I know that you're ready to carry on. Very good, everyone. Thank you. So here comes a last step. Now, if we were in a room together, I would ask now to hold up the scribbles for a moment and to show them to each other. So let's do this into the camera. At the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, show your scribbles, show what you did It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be so beautiful. And that's all correct. Wonderful. So I can see curvy lines. I can see circles. I can see spirals. Very good. So the last step would be that, and because of time, we're not going to do this now, but is there one volunteer who would volunteer their scribble? And we would phenomenologically describe it. And so in a mediation process, here's what I would do. I would ask one party to describe the scribble of the other party. And I will teach them how to do this without interpretation, as if you were describing this image to someone who was blind, to make sure that the blind person can really see which lines are on there and how are they situated on the page. So who would be willing to volunteer their scribble that we can all together practice our phenomenological description? Come on, guys, don't be shy. Yes, hold on. I love it. Very good. Okay. So would you mind if I, or maybe Dominique, maybe you can do this to spotlight her drawing so that we can all see it? Yes, just hold it into the camera and hopefully you can hold it for a moment, okay?
Okay.
Good. So everyone, look at what she did and how would you describe it in a phenomenological way? What lines can you see? Anyone? Open up your microphones, let's collect. Just blurt it in, popcorn style. We don't need to be organized here. What do you see? How do the lines look like?
Like oval circles, or yeah, oval.
Very nice. So there are many different oval circles, right? Overlapping sometimes, but they're oval in a horizontal fashion, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Good. Anything else? Now,
Spiraling,
spiraling, very good. Yes, they're spiraling.
and they are deep into
There are.
deep.
They're big. Yes, they're taking up the whole width of the paper, right? Yes, very good observation. Good. And so I would add maybe the circles also have a certain dynamic, because circles always have a certain dynamic, you know, when you draw these lines. Okay, Nauman, anything else to add?
Yeah, since somebody said about spiraling, it made me think about the Fibonacci sequence, which spirals out in the nature. It's more focused, going beyond and beyond.
Good, good, good. So it has a certain dimension entailed in it, right? It's not one-dimensional, but it's more dimensional in that sense. Yeah? Good. Okay. Nyabula, last comment.
Oh, thanks for that. So my interpretation of the diagram is, so if you kind of think of the descriptive process of, you know, kind of internalizing the feelings, I think all the circles for me are a representation of inner conflict and how that inner conflict caves in on itself. So like if you think of like a whirlwind and you think of like a hurricane, so it represents, you know, kind of the spiraling of emotions and that inner conflict. And I think that's what the diagram, or the picture at least for me, spells out, that inner conflict. There's not just circles, but it represents the inner chaos that exists within the self at that point in time when you're in a conflict situation.
Yeah, very good. Nyabula, thank you. You left the phenomenological description. Thank you, Huda, for showing it up. Yes, you can take it down now. You left the phenomenological description and moved into associative description. It looks like a hurricane, or, you know, the spiraling of a conflict, and with that already into an interpretation. That is very tricky, because here's why is this tricky. Let's say Huda is party A. She has now opened up, shown something of her inner landscape. dared to step out of her comfort zone to show something that was out of a momentary, spontaneous expression of hers. When we get into interpretation, we may or may not hit the sweet spot. It's a hit and miss thing. And so when we do this, we could either open the doors with Hoda or we could close them. So my recommendation is, and you did this really well, I want to highlight that, you refrained from the very beginning and repeated that again. From my perspective, as I see conflict, as conflict feels to me, you know, you framed it like that. And so that was kind of the anchor, how you pulled out the dangerous interpretation into your own space. So good. Well done with that. Be very mindful to do this though, because it's a tricky, icy field. Good.
Of course, I do agree.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so Hoda, if you were now party A, I would ask you, having gone through this process now with the relaxation and then the drawing out and hearing some of the descriptive words, how does this conflict show up itself to you now? How does it look to you now? Has something changed? Has something solidified? Is there a new thought? So how would you look at your conflict now after this process? And so, I mean, since there wasn't really a conflict in the beginning, but maybe you can say something about what is different now from before, in your own experience. Maybe before you were tensed, or you were stressed out about certain things, and now you feel more relaxed, or so where are you now in comparison to how you began?
Okay, actually, now I'm more relaxed because I have, it's like I have now some connection with the people here. I just exited my, I'm out of my comfort zone, and then I'm not, I have some connection. So I feel some empathy.
Yes.
And yeah, that's
Yeah, good. Well, Hoda, this is a lot. More relaxation, more connection, more, and I would add, you didn't say that, maybe more safety to show yourself. Stepping out of your comfort zone, being willing really to show yourself, to contribute to the process, to go beyond your discomfort to make something happen.
yeah.
These are plenty of things in such a short time. See?
And easier for me to express myself. Maybe in the conflict, I can express my emotions now.
Yeah, it is easier, right? It becomes easier once we're going through a process like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. So, looking at the time, it is now 7 o'clock. Let me make my finishing remarks on this little endeavor with you. An hour is always too short. So, let me summarize what I find very important. Hopefully, we understood now the big effect of a creative process, how it can really enhance and enlighten certain things. And the design of the process is very important, that you understand, why am I doing this? What do I want to achieve with it? And which process then lends itself to this kind of two questions in the beginning. So what could I do to get exactly this? And it's helping to think in a metaphoric way. As we said before, I want to create empathy, relationship to each other. How in a creative process can that relationship be experienced? And this is how you design it. And then the third step is that you start to frame it and to communicate it, to say it in a way that it makes sense for people, that they're like, okay, I'm willing to try this out. Yeah? Is there any questions or final comments from you? Because here's my suggestion. For all the people who could stay on for a little bit longer, I would offer that we look at a case or two of you that you have mediated or that you have done in the past or that you will do in the future. And together we can brainstorm, would a creative process be feasible? How would it look like? When to do it? How to design it? To kind of brainstorm that through, if you wanted to. That would be my option. And you don't need to say anything about it. You can just stay in after we've finished. So thank you for your wonderful attention. It was a lot of big pleasure to work with you. Of course, there's so much more to say about this, but I hope that I could get you a little bit inspired and maybe give you a little glimpse of how to do something like that and how to be practical about it. Even though, you know, I mean, of course, there's big study behind it. So don't worry if you don't get the full gist of it in 1 hour. So thank you for your attention.